The heartbreak and anger of Ben Needham's mother. News at last on how he may have died. A man finally admits to Greek police his friend could have killed Ben in a digger accident.
Could have been ended 25 years ago. Could have. I could have probably forgiven that person back then, but now, no. It's 25 years of misery to find out this ending.
Also this lunchtime, 2 injured as flash floods lead to a train derailment and widespread disruption. Half a month's rain in a night. UKIP poised to unveil Nigel Farage's successor. We are live for the announcement. Matt Dawson on his son's meningitis and why he wants more parents to know the risks. And
you and I are just like a couple of dots.
Ted McDermott's 80 and has dementia, but he could be about to become a pop star.
This is ITV News with Alistair Stewart.
Good afternoon. Every day for a quarter of a century, Kerry Needham has lived with unanswered questions. Her son Ben was only 21 months old when he disappeared from the Greek farmhouse on Kos, where his family was spending the summer. Despite tirelessly appealing for news, she's never found out what happened. Now, a local man has given police new information. His friend, he says, killed Ben by accident and buried his body nearby. It has left Kerry heartbroken and furious. Now, awaiting final confirmation as officers prepare for one final search. She's been speaking to our correspondent, Martin Geisler.
The past 25 years have been a long, dark, lonely journey for Kerry Needham, but the desperate search for her missing son may finally be reaching an end. Detectives on the case have received new, credible information. They now believe Ben died on the day he disappeared, killed in an accident on the Greek island of Kos and buried nearby. They think they know where the body is, and they're preparing to dig. Kerry has been warned to brace herself for the worst.
We've lived for 25 years with that hope that one day he will come through the door, and we don't want to accept it. It's going to be difficult, really, really difficult.
Ben was just 21 months old when he disappeared in July 1991. There have been more than 300 sightings of boys matching his description since then. Land has been searched, DNA tests carried out on young men, and artists' impressions have been released showing how Ben may have aged. Each time, Kerry's hopes have been raised and then crushed. The new theory points to this man, Konstantinos Barkas. He's said to have been driving a digger close to the farmhouse where Ben was last seen. It's alleged he may have killed Ben by accident, then buried the body. Barkas died recently, and only then did a friend of his come forward to share that thought with police.
This new witness that's come forward is obviously a man from Kos. He's known our family. He's seen me on the TV. He's seen my family on the TV for 25 years. And he knew this information 25 years ago, of course. I'm angry. He could have ended this 25 years ago. I could have grieved, had my daughter, moved. You'll never forget your child, but at least I would have known where he was, you know, and I could have done something with my life instead of having a life on hold and not being able to do anything or focus on anything and live in this nightmare. It could have been ended 25 years ago. Could have. I could have probably forgiven that person back then, but now, no. It's 25 years of misery to find out this ending. No, it's going to be difficult.
With limited funds available, this is likely to be the final push for the Ben Needham investigation. Kerry knows if she doesn't get an answer this time, it's likely she never will.
And Martin, as you can see, is here with me live now. Extraordinary, powerful emotions, heartbreak and devastation.
She's an extraordinary woman, Alistair. She is incredibly strong, incredibly robust emotionally, because she's had to be for a quarter of a century, but she's lived for those 25 years with a broken heart. And she knows that whatever comes out of the next few weeks will not be good. She's faced with this awful two awful scenarios. Either they find a body and this hope that she's clung to that's kept her going all this time is finally extinguished, or they find nothing and she has to accept that she will probably live the rest of her life without ever knowing what happened to her son. It's unimaginable. But amidst this whole swirl of emotions, out of this fog, comes the one central emotion that she's feeling at the moment, which is anger at this person who's come forward suddenly with this information that she believes could have unlocked this mystery or solved it perhaps 25 years ago.
And what happens in those next few weeks that you just talked about?
Well, South Yorkshire Police have issued a statement today. They say there will be planned operational activity at 2 locations in the island that have been identified as areas of interest to the investigation. They don't say much more than that, but they will be going out there. They will be conducting this investigation. Kerry Needham has been told that there is no absolute X marks the spot. They've narrowed it down to 2 areas, but nothing more precise than that. But she has detected from the people that she's been speaking to that they know perhaps a little bit more than they're telling her. She's picking up, and it's fair to assume that they wouldn't be undergoing what is going to be a fairly extensive, very extensive, and probably very expensive exercise if they didn't have, they think, good reason to do so.
Martin, thank you. A train derailed this morning following a landslide caused by torrential rain. 2 people were injured. It happened just outside London near Watford and led to massive disruption for commuters and long-distance travellers on what's one of the country's busiest lines. There was flooding too in other parts of the country as the summer came to an abrupt end. Sally Lockwood with the latest.
Chaos and disruption for commuters today, but none more so than for 150 passengers trapped inside this tunnel for nearly 5 hours. 2 people were injured when the 619 from Milton Keynes to Euston hit this landslide and derailed. It was then clipped by an oncoming train. Passengers were eventually rescued, shaken but largely unscathed, knowing this incident could have been far, far worse.
I feel like it was a very lucky escape. We were actually in the second carriage, and which was scary enough. The people in the first carriage must have been awful for them.
We derailed, we had some landslide just going into a tunnel. The front 3 carriages, I believe, derailed. And then very shortly afterwards, another train coming the other direction clipped the front edge of ours. The damage to that train we saw looked bad, but apparently the damage to our train was a lot worse.
I actually thought that this was the end, and that the guy sitting opposite me, he even fell off his chair, and then it just was pitch black, and then they just announced and said that the train derailed and hit into the other train.
Other routes were also severely affected. Newbury Station was just one of several that was completely flooded this morning. This commuter filming his attempt to return home in bare feet.
I'm just hoping this is not too deep.
With roads also severely disrupted, other options for travel were limited.
Cars going underwater here.
Heavy storms saw almost half a month's rainfall in some parts of the country overnight. Reports of lightning strikes on houses in the worst hit southern and eastern areas, where thousands of homes are now without power. London Midland trains in and out of the capital have been cancelled until further notice. And with storms and heavy rain expected to continue, those who did make it into work today may have problems getting home. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
And Victoria Grimes is outside a train station just near Watford. Victoria, what's happening this afternoon right now?
Well, Alistair, what's called a train-to-train rescue has taken place. Those 2 trains that were stranded inside the tunnel there, the passengers were put onto another train and then they were brought first here to King's Langley Station. Now, they weren't meant to travel on to Hemel Hempstead first, but apparently one of the passengers wanted to get off here and then many others then followed suit. We're told that one of the injured was taken to hospital, but their condition isn't thought to be life-threatening. Now, those 2 trains are still in the tunnel. We're told it's going to take some time to remove them. Until they're removed, the damage to the track caused by the landslip can't be assessed. So the advice for passengers is that they could be facing delays today, and coupled with the inclement weather we're having and flooding across the country, well, the advice is on this, which is the busiest train line in Europe, that delays could continue. And with the weather, well, it certainly signals the end of the summer.
Victoria, thank you. And there will be a full weather forecast at the end of this programme. Still to come before that, Matt Dawson joins me to talk about his son's fight against meningitis. And
You make me feel so young.
how a bit of carpool karaoke landed this 80-year-old a record deal. But before all of that, and in the past few minutes, the next leader of UKIP has been announced at the party's conference in Bournemouth.
With 8,451 votes, the leader of the UK Independence Party, Diane James.
Well, she didn't go to any of the hustings, but she's seen off 4 other contenders on the ballot paper to become the successor to Nigel Farage. And she is on stage right now. Let's join her live.
Chairman, Nigel Conference. Well, thank you for that. It's going to take me a little while to come back down to earth, I can assure you. But thank you for your good wishes and for such a wonderful reception. Thank you to everybody who voted, who took part in the contest. My goodness, you've handed over a mantle. But there we go. It's one that I'm deeply honoured, and I do mean deeply honoured, to take on from Nigel. I still quite haven't, come to grips with it. I'm still pinching myself. But I'm just so immensely grateful for what you've done and what you've bestowed on me.
Diane James, the new leader of UKIP, and our political correspondent, as you can see, is live there for us at the conference. Your first reaction about this new winner, Libby?
Yes, well, when we came down here this morning, we weren't sure whether this was going to be the end of the peer show for UKIP or the dawn of a new era with a new leader. I think it is the latter, because the party has chosen someone with a good deal of charisma, someone who almost got into Parliament at the Eastleigh by-election 3 years ago. And she will, I think, get noticed. She hasn't said much during the campaign, as you hinted at. She didn't even put forward any policies, saying that she wanted to start with a clean slate, but I think we're going to hear from her pretty soon about how she intends to move forward. An astonishing thought that this party with just one MP has managed to change the course of history, and as Nigel Farage said today as he was bowing out, brought down a Prime Minister.
Libby, thank you. Well, UKIP, of course, wanted the UK out of Europe, and the party got its way with the referendum result back in June. And today, for the first time since the vote to leave, Britain is not at the table as the other European heads of state meet. 27 of them are in Bratislava this lunchtime, as indeed is our Europe editor, James Mates. So, no UK presence there this time, James.
Yes, simply not invited. The other 27 are meeting in this beautiful castle there behind me in Bratislava. But the reason is to map out the post-Brexit future, and for that the opinions of Theresa May and British officials were not required. There's not much agreement, it has to be said, beyond a common view that Britain must not be seen to profit from Brexit, and that no negotiations must be started with Britain before we trigger that Article 50 process that we've heard so much about. On other issues, though, I mean, Angela Merkel of Germany said we are in a critical situation as regards the EU. Jean-Claude Juncker, the Commission President, never before have I seen so little common ground between our member states. Just this week we've had Luxembourg suggesting that Hungary be actually kicked out of the European Union because of their attitude over refugees. They are having lunch on a river cruise on the Danube right now, trying to patch this all together, trying to look to the future, but the problems of the present are very much with them.
James, thank you. A little-known group of volunteers in Syria could find themselves the recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize, thanks to a campaign championed by the late MP Joe Cox. The Syria Civil Defence, also known as the White Helmets, are credited with rescuing more than 60,000 people over the last few years. Today, 3 months on from the death of Joe, many of her colleagues are lending their support to the Syrian volunteers too, as Nazanin Mashiri reports.
During her time as MP, Joe Cox championed the Syrian cause.
I have raised repeatedly in this place the need for a no-bombing zone.
A few months before she was killed, she wrote to the members of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee nominating a group of Syrian emergency workers known as the White Helmets. She told them, in the most dangerous place on earth, these unarmed volunteers risk their lives to help anyone in need, regardless of religion or politics. The awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to these volunteers would do much to ensure their long-term success and survival as the heroes of the greatest humanitarian crisis of our era, and to emphasise peaceful coexistence and solidarity in Syria.
It would be a tribute to the causes that were so close to her heart, and I think would be something which I hope that the world over would recognise was an organisation that was very, very worthy.
While most people would run from the aftermath of the bombing, the White Helmets rush in. This documentary about the workers has been released today. Its 3,000 or so volunteers include carpenters, salesmen and tailors. They've saved more than 60,000 people since 2013. A fund set up to honour Jo Cox has raised more than £1.5 million. A third of the money will go to the White Helmets. Her championing of this incredibly brave group of people has become one of her most important legacies. Nazanin Mashiri, ITV News.
Former England rugby star Matt Dawson's called for more children to be vaccinated against meningitis as part of a new campaign to raise awareness of the disease. Dawson became involved in the campaign after his 2-year-old son Sammy contracted meningitis and became critically ill earlier this year. He released these pictures of his son in hospital at the time. And ahead of Meningitis Awareness Week, wants to do more to raise awareness of the disease and its different strains. Bacterial meningitis can be deadly. Kills more UK children under the age of 5 than any other infectious disease. Meningococcal B is responsible for 90% of meningitis in the UK, with babies and toddlers most at risk. Now, babies born after the 1st of July 2015 are now offered the Men-B vaccine. But for children like Matt's son Sammy, born before that date, the vaccine isn't available on the NHS. Matt's with me in the studio. Good of you to come in.
Problem at all.
You and Carolyn went from spots on Sammy's tummy that looked like a heat rash to A&E to hear a doctor say, we've done all we can, now it's up to Sammy.
Yeah.
I feel quite chilled just reading that out.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit more difficult now than maybe at the time when you're right in the midst of looking after your family. Yeah, looking back and seeing the pictures and hearing those types of statements that were there. And I did. Well, both myself and Carolyn did feel like that at the time.
And neither of you could bring yourselves to ask that question that any parent would. You didn't want to know that the possibility did exist, that Sammy wasn't going to make it.
Well, yeah, you do ask those questions. Yeah, you absolutely do, because you want the reality. You don't want to... I suppose you don't want to think the worst, but actually deep down, you do want to know where you stand. The medical staff at Great Ormond Street were absolutely incredible.
There were 2 hospitals involved, weren't there? Because I'm reading what you'd written about it yourself.
Yeah, Chelsea.
Great Ormond Street and Chelsea, yeah.
Yeah, and the CATs, the ambulance that took Sammy from Chelsea and Westminster to Great Ormond Street. And, that's an incredibly difficult job as well. So yeah, a combination of the 3. The whole team was incredible. And
yeah.
So yeah,
I tried to make clear in the lead-in that it is complicated, as we were saying to each other outside before coming in. This isn't a great campaign against the government for this, that and the other. This is simply eyeballing parents up and down the country saying, be aware of what to look out for and what to do.
Absolutely right. And with myself, with a little bit of profile because of sport or a bit of notoriety, happy to get involved with that. But the charities with Meningitis Now and Meningitis Research Foundation and GSK, the 3 of us are just so aware of the difference difference between Sammy coming away with nothing other than a few scars to other cases where it's been fatal. The awareness, the understanding to look, just the tiny little signs to look out for. Are the hands and feet cold? Is there vomiting? Is there diarrhea? All these signs that you see. Are they worried about the bright lights? And ordinarily you'd think he's just got a virus or a flu, but actually altogether, it can be. It probably is meningitis, and they need to get to A&E.
Matt, thanks for sharing that. In fact, what we've done is we've put exactly what Matt was talking about there and more on our website, How to Protect Your Child. It's there at itv.com/news. And finally, when Simon McDermott filmed himself and his 80-year-old dad, Ted, doing their own version of carpool karaoke. The touching video became a huge internet hit. More so because Ted has dementia and singing is a way for him to express himself. Now, it turns out he has quite a talent and Ted's been given a record deal. Suzanne Verdi has the story.
Tell me, when will you be mine? Tell me quando, quando, quando.
When Simon McDermott posted videos of his 80-year-old dad belting out his favourite songs online, they created a storm. 40 million people watched them and they raised over £100,000 for the Alzheimer's Society.
I wanted to pay something back to the Alzheimer's Society, so I put a link to that to Just Giving, and yeah, it just took off from that, really.
What started as a bit of fun to cheer up his dad as they drove around together got serious when record producer Decca signed him up.
You make me feel so young. You make me feel though spring is sprung.
Ted was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 3 years ago. Some days he barely recognises his son Simon, but he always remembers the words to his favourite songs.
I want to go play hide and seek.
The tragedy is Ted won't remember his incredible experience for long, but the legacy of his singing talent will be hard to forget.
And even when I'm old and grey, I want to feel the way I do today. You make me feel so young.
Get Suzanne Verdi, ITV News.
And that is it this lunchtime. The ITV Evening News is back at 6:30. The news where you are follows the national weather. But for now, from all of us here, bye-bye and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.